Katie Books Productions presents an original podcast, Manhunt, written, produced, and narrated by Earl Sewell. Carmen swiveled her wrist to glance at her wristwatch as she shuffled up the steps of Nikki's apartment building. It was 6 a.m. on Saturday, and the Chicago air was already heavy with sweaty humidity. "I hate this sticky and clammy weather," Carmen complained, as she wiped perspiration from her forehead and the base of her neck. "Nikki had better have her behind out of bed," Carmen muttered, as she noticed a peculiar, scruffy-looking man exiting the brick building. The man was wearing a green t-shirt and cut-off blue jean shorts with black grime stains on the thighs. The grungy man had a face that only a mother could love and reminded Carmen of the scrawny rock and roll icon Mick Jagger. As she approached the entrance, he held the door for her. "Thank you," she whispered as she eased by him and walked over and pressed a silver button on the wall to call the elevator. She stared mindlessly at the orange elevator light paused on the 8th floor. She sighed impatiently, then turned around to look out a nearby window while she mulled over her thoughts. Carmen was disillusioned with the fact that Nikki wasn't doing anything useful with her life. Her baby sister had a day job at an adult bookstore as a peep show girl, and an evening job as a stripper at a seedy gentleman's club. Carmen was sure their parents had to be turning over in their graves, knowing that Nikki was making a living exposing her body to men old enough to be her grandfather. That wasn't the way either of them were raised. "Yeah," Carmen whispered to herself, as she continued to glance out the window. "Nikki's life is dreadful, in my opinion." Carmen shouldered much of the blame for Nikki's appalling lifestyle, and the guilt she toted around was a heavy burden on her heart. Carmen continually attempted to clear the unspoken tension between her and her sister, but reconciling with Nikki was turning out to be a monumental task. Their mother had passed away years ago from a combination of cancer and being a perpetual worrywart. 2 years later, their father, Anthony, died. At the time of his death, Carmen was 21 years old and became guardian of her then 15-year-old sister, Nikki. The untimely loss of their father was the root of the tension between them. Nikki blamed Carmen for the death of their father, and she knew it. Although Nikki hadn't verbalized it as much lately, blame and guilt were parasites eating away at Carmen's soul, and she was tired of toting around her baggage of unhappy feelings. Carmen exhaled, hoping the shift in her breathing pattern would rid her mind of the unwanted and haunting thoughts. She turned back around to check the progress of the elevator and noticed that the scrawny man who had held the door for her was still hovering around the doorway, glaring at her. He licked his lips, flicked his tongue at her a few times, sounding like a dog slurping up water, and brushed his fingers across the stubble on his chin. Carmen translated the glint in his lustful eyes and realized he was having a sexual fantasy about her in his mind. "Go to hell!" Carmen snarled at him as she flipped up her middle finger. "Damn weirdo." The man didn't seem to mind Carmen's harsh words because he continued to glare at her. Nikki has to stop moving into these apartment buildings filled with freaks and crackpots, she muttered as the bell on the elevator chimed. Carmen stepped inside the elevator and pressed the third-floor button. When she got off the elevator, she noticed that the hallway carpet was wet. She wrinkled her nose because the musty and moldy odor was overpowering. She moved quickly down the enclosed corridor toward Nikki's apartment. Curling her fingers into a fist, Carmen drummed on the door with her knuckles. A short moment later, Frida, Nikki's roommate, answered the door. "Hey, Frida," Carmen greeted politely, as Frida allowed her access to their small, cluttered two-bedroom apartment. The place was littered with piles of laundry that needed to be either cleaned or folded, but Carmen couldn't tell which. "Is Nikki out of bed yet?" Carmen asked, crinkling her nose while comparing the untidiness of the apartment to Nikki and Frida's chaotic and messy lifestyle. "Why are you asking a question you already know the answer to?" Frida scraped her fingernails up and down her belly before releasing a loud yawn that assaulted the already stale air with the rotting smell of her morning breath. "You know damn well Nikki and I are like vampires and only function after the sun goes down." Carmen tried to inconspicuously cover her nose with the palm of her hand. Frida's breath, literally, smelled like spoiled food, and its foul odor was making her dizzy. "Well, she's the one who told me to be here this early. I've got to drop my car off at the repair shop. And she promised me that she'd drive over there with me so that I wouldn't have to sit there and wait while a mechanic worked on my car." Yeah, Frida answered as she scratched the side of her neck. "She told me all about it. I think that she would have left work earlier, but this older dude walked into the tavern and started paying her some attention. And you know how Nikki has a soft spot for older men." "I know," Carmen answered. She wasn't giving her full attention to what Frida said because she didn't want their conversation to last longer than necessary. The only thing she wanted her to do was to stop talking. Carmen sauntered into the kitchen area and inspected a banana sitting on the countertop. After checking it thoroughly for bruising, she decided that it appeared safe enough to eat. "He was a nice-looking man," Frida continued, to Carmen's annoyance. "He looked like he used to play football or something. You know, the type that probably has a large stash of money hidden somewhere." Carmen coyly answered, hoping that Frida picked up that she did want to continue their conversation. Carmen noticed a chair that wasn't cluttered with clothes positioned in the corner of the room. She decided to sit and wait for her sister. "You don't seem like you're in a talkative mood. But then again, you never are. I'm going back to my room. Besides, Francisco came over early this morning and gave me some grown man loving. My body trembles just thinking about having my ass in the air while he sucks on my wet, sweet, juicy Spanish pussy." Carmen could not have cared less about Frida's sex life, and if her pussy was as funky as her breath, Francisco had to be one nasty motherfucker to put his face anywhere near her smelly ass. "Yeah, whatever. You're telling me way too much information," Carmen said. She was glad Frida was taking her body funk back into the bedroom. "There's no need to be jealous, honey." Oh, Lord, here we go, Carmen thought. "You and your stuck-up attitude will get a man to fuck you right one of these days. Hopefully, he'll be able to mellow you out some. How long has it been since that no-good professor dumped you? What, 9 years? Or is it 10? Frida snickered. He had your head all messed up when he canceled the wedding on you after you spent all of your money planning this elaborate event, which you specifically told me I wasn't invited to. I still haven't forgotten that evil shit. I'm glad he cracked your prissy little face and left you all broken up. You needed to be taught a lesson." Frida used threatening hand gestures to emphasize her point. "Frida, it's too damn early in the morning to dig up old shit and start a fight with me. I didn't come over here for that." Carmen was more than willing to bare her claws and stir up an ugly argument if Frida didn't back down. "Trust me, you do not want to toy with me this morning." Frida chuckled. "You don't scare me, honey. Not one bit." Frida said her piece and then made her way down a narrow corridor to the bedrooms. She banged hard on Nikki's bedroom door. "Your snotty-ass sister is here," Frida said, loud enough for Carmen to hear. The animosity between Frida and Carmen was like a knife in her back that she couldn't reach. In fact, as Carmen saw it, Frida was a part of the reason that her relationship with Nikki was so sour at times. Jason Tanner, protege of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., has been by his mentor's side in New York to spread the message of passive resistance. In Harlem, the epicenter of black culture, poet Anita Hopkins tries to capture the message of Malcolm X, which she believes with all her heart. The time is now. Enough is enough. When Jason goes to the iconic B-flat lounge and sees Anita perform, he's transfixed. Her passion for what she does runs as deep as his. And Anita has never met anyone who could match her wit for wit like this. Confessions in B-Flat, a novel by USA Today best-selling author Donna Hill. Download your copy today, wherever books are sold. Carmen's train of thought was interrupted by Nikki, who came into the living room wearing blue sweatpants, a TLC sweatshirt that said, "Ain't too proud to beg," a baseball cap, and dark black sunglasses. Nikki had not matured much since she'd been out on her own. She still liked marching in the opposite direction of what was normal. "Nikki, it's humid, hot, and sticky outside. You're going to sweat like a pig in those clothes. It's okay. I got the air conditioner in my hoopty mobile fixed. One of my neighbors, who looks like Mick Jagger, fixed it. I can turn it on if I get too hot, but you know me. I'm always cold, so it's unlikely that I'll get hot." That guy doesn't look like the mechanical type. Carmen gave her sister a sarcastic glare. "And what's that supposed to mean?" Nikki instantly picked up on her sister's sarcasm. "Why are you always judging people?" "Never mind," Carmen uttered. She was not in the mood for an argument. "Let's go so we can drop off my car and get it repaired." "Yeah, let's go before you piss me off." Nikki moved past her sister and walked out of the apartment. Carmen pulled her blue Dodge Daytona into the parking lot of the Magic Muffler and Brake Shop on Stony Island Boulevard. It was 6:45, and there were already 5 people standing in line at the door because service was given on a first-come, first-served basis. Carmen parked her car and then stood in line and waited with the other patrons. A few moments later, she saw Nikki creeping into the parking lot in her rusted-out Nissan Sentra with one red door and one white door. Carmen noticed that all of Nikki's car windows were rolled down. It was a clear indication that the air conditioning wasn't working at all. The shop owner finally opened the door and began attending to customers in the proper order. While the owner was out inspecting the car of another customer, Carmen noticed one of the mechanics arriving. Carmen stared at the brawny man wearing a blue mechanic suit that zipped up the front. His skin was the color of gingerbread, and he had sizable arms, a wide chest, and broad shoulders. He didn't appear to be the type that worked out at a gym. His burly build seemed to be more genetic. The brawny man went to the back of the garage where the supplies were stored and then reappeared a few moments later behind the front counter. "Who's next?" he asked, with a forceful tone in his voice. "I am," Carmen answered. "What kind of car do you have?" he asked without looking up as he rested his fingers on the computer keyboard, eager to input her information. "Dodge Daytona," Carmen answered and watched the man's thick brown fingers slowly peck the information into the computer. "What's your address?" he asked. 1642 East 56th Street. "Oh, you stay over in Hyde Park. That's Obama's neighborhood," he commented. "How long have you lived over there?" He took his eyes off the computer screen and met her gaze. She noticed that his skin had become slightly glossy with sweat from the humidity. His face was unyielding and his expression was uncompromising. She suddenly felt as if she were being interrogated. "I've lived there a little over a year. I teach at Bret Harte Elementary School." She didn't want to tell him that, but for some reason, she couldn't make herself shut up. Maybe it was because of his strict glare. It had somehow overpowered her and caused her to say more than she wanted to. She offered a Pollyannish smile in an attempt to break the intensity of his glare. That didn't help. He kept his blazing eyes on her. Carmen suddenly wondered what had gone wrong in his life. "What kind of problems are you having?" He broke eye contact abruptly and continued to peck at the keyboard. "When I press the brakes, I hear a scrubbing sound," Carmen answered with a soft voice. "Is it a scrubbing or a squeaking sound?" "No, it's definitely a scrubbing sound, and the brakes almost touch the floor before the car begins to stop." Carmen noticed the monogram lettering on his overalls. His name was stitched in yellow letters. Luther was his name. He typed in some more information and then asked for her car keys. "I need to test drive it before I pull it in and get it in the air." "Okay," Carmen said as she handed over her car keys. Luther walked out to her car, got in, and drove off. A few minutes later, he returned and pulled her car into the far stall. Carmen observed from a distance through a glass window in the lobby as he pressed the air drill to the wheel lugs and removed the tires one by one. Carmen then felt a light tap on her shoulder. "Do they have a soda machine in here?" It was Nikki. She picked up a muffler brochure from the countertop and began fanning herself as if she were sitting in church, trying to keep cool. "No, I don't think that they do. There's an Amoco gas station across the street. I think they sell cold drinks," Carmen said. "Do you have any idea how much longer it's going to take to get an estimate?" "It shouldn't be too much longer. He has my car in the air right now." "Well, I'm going to run over to the gas station and get me something to drink. It's hotter than hell out there." "I told you that your ass was going to burn up." "Whatever," Nikki answered. "I'll be right back." Nikki turned and left without saying another word. Carmen turned her attention back to her car and saw Luther was waving his hand, signaling for her to come and take a look at what he'd found. Carmen walked through the garage toward Luther. "You're going to have the front brake pads replaced. The rotors need replacing as well." He pointed to the silver disc that the pads rubbed against in order to bring the car to a stop. "The scrubbing sound that you were hearing was the sound of the metal rubbing against metal." "Shit," Carmen hissed, because it was starting to sound as if the repairs were going to set her back financially. "How long has the brake light on the dashboard been on?" Luther asked as he continued his inspection. "I don't know, 3, maybe 4 weeks." Carmen shrugged her shoulders. "If you had bought the car in sooner, you wouldn't have this problem." Luther didn't mean to be cold with his answer. He was only telling her the truth. Carmen's mood changed in that instant. "How much is this going to cost me?" I don't know. I'll have to look up the cost of the parts. Luther was now inspecting the rear brakes. I don't want to spend a small fortune on repairs. I'm letting you know that now. Carmen became standoffish. She hoped her attitude would indicate that she had done some kind of research on brake repair jobs and wasn't going to pay 1 cent over what she considered to be a fair price. Your rear brakes will last a little longer, but not too much longer. You'll probably need to replace them by this winter. Luther continued his inspection. He was now focusing on the muffler system. Do you see this? He pointed to a brown rust spot in the muffler pipeline. That's the beginning of a hole. By the time the winter sets in, you're going to have to replace this pipe or your car will sound like a tank coming down the street. Luther did one more check to make sure that everything was tightly secure. Carmen stood with her arms crisscrossed. Her irritation level was rising with each second that ticked by. She simply wanted to know the cost of fixing the brakes. She could not have cared less about the muffler. Her main concern was that her car came to a stop when she pressed the brake pedal. Okay, let's go back up front and I'll give you an estimate. Luther stepped back behind the counter and began looking up the cost of the parts and calculated the cost of the labor involved. He leaned toward her, resting his arms on the countertop, and began explaining the itemized list he placed before her. The brake pads are $79.99. The new rotors are $100 each. You need 2 of those. The labor will cost you $75. There's a $2 disposal fee, plus tax, brings your total to this right here. Luther circled the number. $387.99? Carmen blurted out the words before she had a chance to adjust her tone. Don't you have some kind of discount or sale going on? No. Luther was sharp and abrupt with his answer. Well, I think you're robbing me and charging me way too much. Carmen got loud with Luther. There was no way she was about to let him take advantage of her like this. She wanted him to look at the estimate again and give her some type of discount, especially if she was about to spend damn near $400. Look, lady, Luther barked. He had an evil glare and viciousness in his voice. I wasn't the one who was driving around in the damn car for a fucking month with a motherfucking brake light on. I don't set the goddamn prices, the factory does. Carmen flinched with fear. She thought for sure the mechanic had lost it. She was not expecting to get an explosive reaction from him. At that moment, the shop owner walked back with a customer. He'd overheard Luther and quickly pulled him into the garage area for a private conversation. What the fuck is wrong with you, man? Carmen overheard the shop owner rip into Luther as the door to the garage area slowly shut. You don't talk to my customers like that. Luther glanced at Carmen, and his eyes were blazing with resentment. Carmen wanted to leave, but she couldn't because her car was still in the air. The owner cupped his hand and placed it at the back of Luther's neck so he could hold his gaze. She can kiss my ass, man. Luther howled out loud enough for Carmen to hear. That's it. Get out of here. The owner shouted back. Fuck you, man. I don't need this shitty-ass job anyway. Carmen watched as Luther gathered his belongings and left. A moment later, the owner came back and spoke with Carmen. Look, ma'am, I'm sorry that he yelled at you like that. I'm only going to charge you a flat fee of $300 for the repairs to your car. Is that fair enough? Okay, but where's Luther going? Ma'am, he had 2 strikes against him already. The owner paused. But I was the one who provoked him. I don't want the man to lose his job because of me. Carmen felt horrible. Miss, we get upset customers all the time. It's part of the business, and he knows that. He should not have used that threatening tone with you. I've spoken with him about his tone of voice on several occasions and warned him about it. He had a final warning yesterday. I'm a small business owner, and how my customers are treated is very important for my referral and repeat customers. I don't want my customers to have a bad experience when they come here. Do you understand where I'm coming from? But Carmen's voice trailed off. Ma'am, do you want your car repaired or not? I can get another mechanic started on it right away. Yes, Carmen answered as she watched Luther chase down a Stony Island bus that was heading north. Hi, this is Earl Sewell, creator of the podcasts Lenny Gray and Manhunt. If you like what we do here, please consider a monthly subscription to help support the shows. For your monthly subscription, you'll get exclusive content and even get a chance to interview the show's creator. Just go over to patreon.com/Earl Sewell. That's patreon.com/EARLSEWELL. Once again, just head on over to patreon.com/Earl Sewell. Thank you so much for your support.